Hi, my name is Jen and I help care for my dad who had a stroke and also has congestive heart failure, and I've been taking care of him for about 6 years.
Hi, my name is Don and I've been caring for my uncle with Alzheimer's for about 4 years now. My sisters and I helped take care of my uncle who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 5 years ago. His condition progressed pretty rapidly, so it was important to us to get him into a facility that would take really good care of him. Today, the struggles are vastly different than what they were when we first got him into his new home. Back then, the struggles were really constantly reminding him of where he was and what he was doing there, but we had this breakthrough with one of my sisters had mentioned his time in service, and turns out one of his regular nurses is a war veteran, so them exchanging personal and war stories has really helped him adjust to his new home, and I think has really helped him be less lonely.
My dad has always been stubbornly independent, and so when the time came that we knew we had to put him in a full-time facility, the challenge was to sort of harness his independence and get him to a place where we knew he was taken care of and his needs were met, but he also still felt like he had some of that independence. And luckily I was able to work with his care team and make sure that they understood some of his more quirky preferences, like only strawberry jello, no lime, stuff like that, and that did help him to adapt to his new home a little quicker and a little easier.
Hello there, I'm John Shaw, CEO of Caregiver Action Network. Today there are more than 90 million Americans caring for a loved one in this country. Those family caregivers express the full spectrum of caregiving. Some are caring for an older loved one. Some are caring for a child with significant health care needs, such as autism. Some are caring for a family member, a friend, a spouse, or a neighbor with a disability or chronic condition like Parkinson's or MS. The stories that you just heard were family caregivers talking about the role they played in their loved one's transition into a long-term care facility. In this upstream training module for care professionals working in long-term care communities, we dig a little deeper into the caregiver role and discuss the ways they support their loved ones in the process of transitioning into a long-term care community and how that is ultimately beneficial to you as a care professional. But before we can discuss the role of family caregivers more deeply, we need to define exactly what we mean by the phrase transition of care. Transition of care is the process of an individual moving into a long-term care community. They may be transitioning or moving straight from the hospital, following a procedure or extended hospitalization. They may be moving from the home that they have lived in for a number of years, be that their own home or the home of a family member. Or they may be moving to a community from a rehab center. I want to give some clarification on a couple of the terms I just now used, because you'll continue to hear them throughout this module and the other 3 modules included in this series. When we use the term long-term care community, we're talking about a variety of settings, including nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities, and assisted living facilities. The term care professional is used to identify any and all staff at those facilities, including, but not limited to, medical staff, nurses, administrators, social workers, case managers, and patient and family advisory committees. While that may seem pretty straightforward, the mission of Caregiver Action Network, for me, is deeply personal. You see, I'm a long-distance caregiver for my mom, so I understand the challenges and stresses of ensuring that your loved one is well taken care of, even when you can't be there. There are real, tangible concerns and how and when I'm able to communicate with my mom and her care team. It not only helps to put me at ease as the family caregiver, but her as well. Now at this point, I will hand this over to Jessica, who will guide you through the rest of this module. Before I turn it over, I'd like to recognize our sponsor, Omnicare Pharmacy, a CVS Health company. Their support allows us to bring this information to you.
Thanks, John. Before I get started, I want to mention that this module is one in a series that can all be accessed at caregiveraction.org/omnicarepharmacy. The topics of the other coordinated modules include why family caregivers matter, what family caregivers need, what family caregivers want, and how they can support the care professionals at the long-term care communities. Now, let's take a closer look at how family caregivers support their loved ones in moving to a long-term care community. Earlier, John talked a bit about the vast spectrum of caregiving scenarios, but I want to start out today by touching on a couple of things that hold true in any of these varied scenarios. Family caregivers know their loved one better than any of the other members of the care team. They are a constant source of support for their loved one across all care settings. The insight that they can provide on their loved one makes them an invaluable member of the team, supporting their loved one in moving to a long-term care community, whether that individual is moving from a hospital, their home, or rehab facility. Let's take a look at a resident transitioning from the hospital. There are two words that come to mind when describing how the family caregiver may feel at this point: underprepared and overwhelmed. I am going to create an example to illustrate this. Let's say my father was hospitalized to undergo a hip replacement. Following the procedure and his recovery at the hospital, it's recommended that he is discharged to an assisted living community. In this situation, the only assistance I may have is the hospital's social worker telling me what assisted living community he will be moved to. I haven't had the opportunity to pick what community he's going to. The social worker may not have provided any information on how I should be working with the care professionals at the community to ensure the discharge and follow-up care plans are being implemented. A combination of these unknowns have left me feeling incredibly underprepared and overwhelmed. So I shared what some of my difficulties may be in moving Dad from the hospital following his surgery. I talked about feeling underprepared and overwhelmed. Now, let's say I am moving Dad from his home. He was discharged home following his surgery and was managing okay with just my brother and I calling to check in daily and stopping by a couple of times a week for a short time. But now, my brother and I started to notice things that led us to believe Dad may be struggling on his own. For example, stacks of unopened mail, some being bills that were past due, expired food in the fridge, the smoke detector not working due to dead batteries. Both my brother and I live nearby, but work full-time and have families. Finding time to come by isn't easy. We all had that difficult conversation about options to make things a little easier for all of us, and agreed that moving to an assisted living community is the best option. This hasn't been an easy decision to make, but everyone in the family feels a sense of relief that he'll be somewhere safe. While we all agree that the move is in Dad's best interest, it has still been hard for him to leave the home he has lived in for decades. His mood changes a bit when we talk about the logistics of the move. He's quiet and withdrawn. Speaking of logistics, my brother and I must figure out what we are going to do with all of the things Dad can't move with him. Do we sell them? Do we put things in storage? And there's also guilt. I see how Dad is struggling with the move, and I feel terrible I can't do enough to keep him at home. Now, one other possible scenario. Moving Dad to the assisted living community from a short-term care community, such as a rehab center. Let's say, following Dad's hip replacement surgery, we decided to take a recovery route that included extensive physical therapy. Taking into account the difficulties Dad would have getting around the house while recovering and the difficulty of getting him to and from therapy appointments, we decided it would be the best option to move Dad to a rehab center near the hospital for a short time, so this part of the care plan could be carried out. He stayed there for 3 months. He made friends with other residents and staff. I would visit 3 times a week, including a weekly debrief meeting with his therapists and staff to get updates on how he's doing. I appreciated these weekly meetings and formed a great relationship with the staff assisting Dad. As Dad began reaching his therapy goals, we had to figure out next steps. We spent some time during these weekly meetings discussing next steps. Once therapy had gotten Dad as far as it could, would he be able to live at home alone? It eventually became clear that, even with the progress he had made, he wouldn't be able to be at home without a lot of additional in-home support. We chatted with Dad about options. He wasn't comfortable with the in-home support, and that kind of ruled out him staying at home. I didn't have space for Dad to live with me, and I work full-time, meaning he would still need in-home care while I was at work. So we talked about him moving to the assisted living center near my home. While it seemed like the only feasible option to make sure Dad was getting the care he needed, I was worried. Dad had developed such a wonderful relationship with the therapists and aides that worked with him daily at the rehab center. Would the staff at the assisted living center be able to do the same? Would I be able to get regular updates on what he was doing? Now that we have seen what these scenarios can look like, let's do a quick review. So we've got family caregivers helping their loved ones move from the hospital following a procedure or hospitalization and are feeling underprepared and overwhelmed. We've got family caregivers helping their loved ones move from their homes and are feeling guilty and fearful. And we've got family caregivers helping their loved ones move from a short-term care facility and are feeling uncertain and worried. Regardless of the caregiving scenario, there are common concerns or worries that all family caregivers struggle with when their loved one moves to a long-term care community. Having a sense of these can help you anticipate questions and plan to help these caregivers feel more at ease. So what are family caregivers worried about when their loved one makes the move? 1. That their loved one's healthcare providers, doctors, therapists, specialists have been informed of the transition. 2. That their loved one will continue to get all of their medications as prescribed. 3. Knowing what personal items will be able to be brought over to make their loved one more comfortable and more at home. 4. Establishing a point of contact with someone at the long-term care community they can reach out to for questions and updates. So now I've talked a bit about how the process of moving a loved one to a long-term care community impacts the family caregiver, while also describing some specific ways family caregivers support their loved one's move from either the hospital, home, or short-term care facility. Regardless of where a loved one is moving from, all family caregivers are crucial in one aspect of transition: preventing transfer trauma, or relocation stress syndrome, for the new resident. The signs of transfer trauma can be identified through a change of mood. Those changes in mood can be sadness, anger, or irritability. There can also be the development of challenging behaviors, such as screaming, complaining, withdrawal and isolation, and refusing care or refusing to take medication. Transfer trauma can also present psychological symptoms like sleeplessness, poor appetite, or mental confusion. Family caregivers can be integral in preventing transfer trauma by assisting with things like ensuring that their loved one's preferences are being honored, safeguarding or securing their personal belongings, ensuring as much of their regular daily routine is maintained as possible, and making their new home resemble their old home as much as possible. We've given you a lot of information, and I'd like to close out this module by putting much of what we've covered in an example many of us may be familiar with. Think about a child's first day of school. Oftentimes, a parent will walk in with the child so they feel a bit more comfortable in the new setting. They will help their child get familiarized with the space, finding their desk, locating the restroom, and they will chat with the teacher in charge about their child's preferences and ways to handle challenging behaviors. Does some of that sound familiar to what we covered earlier? So, whether the new resident is moving to a long-term care community from the hospital, their own home, or the home of family member, the family caregivers are one of the biggest assets you have to making that transition to the long-term facility an easier one. I hope that we have reinforced things you may have already known and challenged you to think of some of your daily routines a little differently. The family caregiver is ultimately a key asset in much of the work you are doing, and building a strong relationship with them not only helps to provide the best possible care to your patient, but will put them more at ease and make your job a little easier.
Well, to be honest, my dad and I have not always had the best relationship, but being able to support him during this phase of his life has been really rewarding, and it has helped both of us heal a bunch of old wounds. I think for me, it's knowing that I'm doing the best that I can and working with his care team to make sure that he's as comfortable as possible, and then that gives me peace of mind throughout my day, like when I'm at work or with my kids.
I think the most rewarding thing about being a caregiver has been watching him bond with the team and them embracing his situation despite his lack of remembering things. I think early on, knowing his wishes has really helped us honor them now.
If you ever have to transition someone you love into long-term care, I would definitely say do not be afraid to over-communicate with the care team. Anything that they like, all of their funny, quirky little preferences, because that's the stuff that ultimately makes them feel more at home. And actually, it makes the care team's job easier knowing that, while also ensuring that your loved one is content.
My advice to future caregivers is that if you ever have to put a family member or a loved one into any type of facility is to not feel guilty. Definitely get to know the staff early on and brief them on you and your family and your loved one's background, because you really never know the types of connections that you build that lead to better care for the people that you love.
Thank you for tuning in to learn a little bit more about the important role of family caregivers in the transitions of care. We hope that the information and the stories shared from family caregivers has given you a sense of how important the role of family caregiver is throughout the transition of care. Be sure to connect with Caregiver Action Network on social media and visit caregiveraction.org to find more information and resources for family caregivers, including our Caregiver Help Desk, a tool that connects family caregivers with caregiving experts via phone, chat, or email to find answers to difficult questions and be heard.